Welcome to the Glenn Beck program. Tonight from Phoenix, Arizona. Tonight I'm going to give you a story that will blow your mind. We touched on it last night about a 31-year-old kid, and I say kid because he's just out of college and he didn't finish, who is actually changing the way America does business. Plus, is the media just in love with Barack Obama, or, as evidence is now starting to show, they're actually afraid of the President of the United States? And there's another case of bullying, this time the government bullying the police, or in this case, the Sheriff Joe Arpaio, live from Phoenix. He'll be joining me in just a few minutes. You don't want to miss a second of this show, especially if you believe that the government meddling is a recipe for disaster. It's time to mix things up. Come on, follow me. Well, hello, America. I am live at the Dodge Theater in Phoenix, Arizona, where in just a few hours I'm going to be performing the second night of my Common Sense comedy show. Would love to see you here tonight. We'll talk about it a little later and show you some clips from last night's performance in, where were we? Denver. But tonight, here's the one thing, and there is absolutely nothing funny about it. We talked about a little bit last night. The wonderkin in charge of saving our auto industry is a 31-year-old with about as much experience as a summer intern. Despite having no formal business education, no business experience, and no auto industry experience, the 31-year-old Brian Deese is now in charge of dismantling General Motors and changing American capitalism. So what does this guy's resume look like? I mean, it should be impressive considering he is managing America's $450,000 per day in voluntary investment. Well, Dees grew up in a Boston suburb, son of a political science professor at Boston College. He then moved to Vermont and attended Middlebury College, where he studied political science. He also took time there to host a campus radio show called Bedknobs and Beatniks, described in one write-up as a format of music, news, and discussion, and banter. He graduated college in 2000, and then it was on to a pair of non-profit think tanks, the Center for Global Development, and then he went right to the Center for American Progress, which is run by the former Clinton Chief of Staff John Podesta and financed by, guess who? We see him again, George Soros. Eventually, Deese went on to Yale for a law degree, but with a few credits short of graduating, he went on leave to work on Senator Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign, quickly becoming her top economic policy staffer, which, really? Last summer, Deese moved to the Obama campaign as Deputy Economic Policy Director. And just before his current gig, he served on Obama's transition team as an economic advisor. He was apparently the only full-time member of the auto task force from election night until about Valentine's Day, which Deese says was, quote, a little scary. Really? Well, what should be a little more than just scary for GM, much less the American people, is that however smart Deese may be, he has literally no private sector experience. Our staff did not check in to see. I don't know. He may have worked at a Gap at one point, but beyond that, I don't know. He is not formally trained in economics or business, and according to the New York Times, he, quote, never spent much time flipping through those endless studies about the nature of American and Japanese auto industries. Oh. In fact, until a few months ago, the closest he came to an automobile plant was sleeping in a GM parking lot where Pontiac G5s have been made since the plant's 1960s heyday. By the way, thanks to Dee's plan, there will no longer be a Pontiac. This is what one of those uniquely qualified geniuses, handpicked by President Obama, looks like. You feeling good about your investment in America? With only 1 out of 5 Americans supporting this ridiculous auto bailout in the first place, I wonder what kind of support there is for the inexperienced Brian Deese to tinker with the auto industry and change capitalism. Those are not my words. Those are the words of the New York Times. I'm not an economist, but like Deese, I am on leave from Yale University. So I guess that makes me uniquely qualified to take a guess at the number 0, which ironically is just a hair less than what GM stock is worth now. We go to Kevin Williamson. He is deputy managing editor for the National Review. Kevin, how did this guy get this job?
Well, in all fairness, Glenn, he did have a radio show at one point.
Well, so did I.
And he slept in his car in the parking lot also. Yeah. So he was kind of bonding with it.
Good.
He's basically a campaign hack. You know, he's a guy who worked for the Center for American Progress. It was essentially a Democratic marketing organization. He worked for the Clinton campaign, and when she went belly up, he hopped over and went to work for the Obama campaign. There's no question that he's a smart kid and all that, but there's no reason to think that he is in any way qualified to be essentially running General Motors. I mean, there's no reason to think the government ought to be running General Motors, period. But if you're going to have the government running General Motors, maybe somebody else should be in charge.
Well, I mean, here's what I'm looking at. I mean, he has no economic experience at all. He's never been in the private sector, and now they put him in as an economic advisor, and then running the task force, or being a real important part in the task force.
Sure,
this is
although in all fairness, he's not really all that much less qualified than the rest of the people on the task force. The head of the task force,
it did strike me that
who used to be a New York Times reporter and then an investment banker. There's a union guy on it. Then, of course, there's a Goldman Sachs representative on it, because nothing can get done in government without Goldman Sachs giving their stamp of approval.
You know, I'm thinking here, Kevin. Where is anyone with any business experience? We've got the financial people. Sure. We have the unions. We have the students. But where is anybody? Where is somebody like what's his name, Jack Welch?
Yeah.
Where is anybody that is?
In terms of the sort of business experience where people make and sell things rather than just Wall Street experience, yeah, you're right, there's not a lick of it on the automotive task force. But that actually probably is sort of the point, because GM is no longer a car company, it's a federal jobs program. So it's natural that it would be run by politicians and not by people who know how to make cars.
The other question that I have is George Soros. He keeps popping up everywhere,
like a bad
all the
penny.
way around.
A whole lot of bad pennies.
Yeah, everywhere. His fingers are in absolutely everything.
Sure.
Do you think this? You find this nefarious at all, or is this just somebody exercising his right to spend the money the way he wants to spend money?
Oh, I think Soros can do what he wants with his own money. We have a pretty good system of disclosure so that people know what he's involved in. I really don't like the Center for American Progress very much. I mean, there are a lot of sort of think tanks and things on the left that I respect, Brookings Institution, people like that. But the Center for American Progress is not really a think tank. It's really it's essentially a democratic marketing organization. They're not guided by any particular philosophy. They're not guided by any particular set of principles. They will just take whatever the day's democratic talking points are and try to reproduce them as some sort of, neutral third-party organization. But it's pretty clear what they are and what they do. If you go read their stuff, they're just party hacks. They're the worst sort of people in politics.
Where do you think we're headed?
Well, we're headed toward having the government run GM forever, essentially. I mean, there was a story in the Wall Street Journal today about GM was thinking about moving its corporate headquarters to Warren, Michigan, out of Detroit. I mean, who could want to leave Detroit, right? But that's been quashed, essentially, and it was quashed by the President of the United States, who called the mayor of Detroit and said it wasn't going to happen. So you've got the government not only, telling the bondholders who's going to get paid and who's not going to get paid, telling the board who's going to be their executive and who isn't, negotiating compensation, saying, where Opel can sell cars if they get spun off and where they can't. You've got them deciding where the corporate headquarters is going to be. And they say, we're not interested in running GM. Well, then why are you running GM?
Yeah, exactly right. Thank you very much. We'll talk again. Now,